Hi, and welcome to Trust and Obey. My name is Chuck Frank, and this is our study of the Book of Esther. And today we're going to be studying chapter 4. And if you can see this painting that is our title slide, it's showing Esther going into the throne room unannounced and appealing to the king. And the king is starting to lean forward. He has his golden scepter in his hand, and if he reaches it out to touch her with it, that means it's okay for her to have come unannounced. If not, then she'll be taken out and executed. This is a decidedly British-looking throne room, but that's okay. It gives us a sense of what's going on, and certainly you see everybody around there is very worried about what the outcome of this is going to be. And let's see how we get to this point. So leading up to this, the antagonist in this book, Haman, who is an Agagite, a descendant of King Agag, and historically people who despised the Jews and attacked them when they crossed the Jordan on their exodus out of Egypt. And God said that they should be completely destroyed, and the Jews did not do that. And so now here is a descendant of King Agag who is manipulating a half-drunk King Ahasuerus into signing legislation which will cause all of the Jews in the 127 provinces to be exterminated on the 13th of March, our time. Esther's adopted father, Mordecai, has decided that he has to do something and that Esther is in a pivotal position. So that's where the action begins. It says, Esther learns of Haman's plot. When Mordecai learned of everything that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. So this decree went out to all of the provinces in the languages of each province, and the Jews everywhere were absolutely stricken by how awful and lethal this legislation is. And it says even in Shushan, they did not understand this because the Jews had been living all throughout the Persian Empire in a positive way for 100 years. This whole thing comes out of left field. It says, when Mordecai learned of everything that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out in the midst of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. So he is making a spectacle of himself. He is trying to attract attention. It says, and he came as far as the king's gate, for no one was to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. It would be disrespectful. And for the Jews, there were two ways of mourning to God over a terrible calamity. And that is, one was to put on sackcloth. The other was to throw ashes all over yourself. And if it was absolutely the worst thing in the world, sackcloth and ashes. So now because he's dressed that way, he can't enter the gate. It says in each and every province where the command and decree of the king came, there was a great mourning among the Jews with fasting, weeping, and mourning rites. And many had sackcloth and ashes spread out as a bed. And this is a depiction of the excavation of the king's gate in Susa, so the actual place where Mordecai is in front of this opening in the foreground on the pavement outside there. Then Esther's attendants and her eunuchs came and informed her, and the queen was seized by great fear. So why would she be seized with great fear? She doesn't know any of this is going on, but she knows her uncle, or her adopted father, who's really her cousin, he said to her, do not let anyone know that you're Jewish, and don't say anything about our family. In other words, keep everything on the down low. And now he's making a scene and performatively going through the mourning rites of a Jew. So it's very obvious to everybody what's going on, and she's scared to death. And she sent garments out to clothe Mordecai so that he would remove his sackcloth from him, but he did not accept them. So she's thinking, I can fix this. We'll get him dressed up nicely. He won't be such a spectacle, but he's also wailing and being loud. Then Esther summoned Hathach from the king's eunuchs, whom the king had appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this mourning was and why it was happening. So she just has absolutely no idea. She's totally isolated. And it's been 30 days since she has seen King Ahasuerus, which she couldn't have expected after he was absolutely in love with her, crowned her queen, and then 30 days, he doesn't even want to see her. She's got to be paranoid too, because this guy has a different beautiful woman in bed every night. So here's a rendering of what the king's gate looked like and the scale. You can see the guards out front. And this is where Mordecai would have come, sat down on the pavement and in sackcloth and ashes and begun wailing. It says, so Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him and the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the elimination of the Jews. Haman promised to give the king $20 million in our money. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict, which had been issued in Susa for their annihilation, so that he might show Esther and inform her, and to order her to go into the king to implore his favor and plead with him for her people. So Hathach came back and reported Mordecai's words to Esther. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and ordered him to reply to Mordecai, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king in the inner courtyard who is not summoned, he has only one law, that he be put to death unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter so that he may live. I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. And they reported Esther's words to Mordecai. So she's saying, what you're asking me to do is most probably going to mean my death. Do you understand that? If I show up in that inner courtyard without an invitation, it's very likely that he'll have me killed. And this is a picture from, I think, from a movie about Esther, showing that throne room and the king on the right and Esther coming up the steps. No, he's in the center underneath this flying dragon figure. She's going to throw herself on his mercy. It says, then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, liberation and rescue will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. Now, this is a very fascinating section because the word God is not mentioned anywhere in the book of Esther. And yet, God's providential hand is everywhere in this book, and Esther and Mordecai totally behave like believers. And here he says, if you keep silent at this time, liberation and rescue will arise for the Jews from another place. Now, wherever that place be, it's going to be from God, God's agency. And you and your father's house will perish. And then another godly statement. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. In other words, the great probability that you as a Jewish orphan would end up being the queen of Persia and be in a position to prevent the genocide of the Jews throughout the entire Persian Empire. Mordecai is referring to the providential hand of God. It says, then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me. Just right there. That's an appeal to God. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants also will fast in the same way, and then I will go into the king, which is not in accordance with the law. And if I perish, I perish. So this is absolutely amazing. She shows unbelievable bravery, and she also shows herself to be a believer, because she is asking everyone to fast in solidarity with her. And they would all be praying for her. And that would give her the strength to face potential death. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. So we're going to have a word of prayer, and we're doing this study in late March of 2025, and yesterday President Trump had all of the JFK files released, and they show very clearly that the death of John F. Kennedy was arranged by the CIA with heavy involvement from Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was president after his death, and apparently a lot of involvement from Israel and their Secret Service. So this is all extremely disappointing. It just shows you how compromised the Israeli government is and our government is. We're praying that all this can be turned around. So President Kennedy was creating the National Day of Prayer, and he made a comment before his prayer where he said, do not pray for easy lives. Pray to be stronger people. So here's his prayer on that day. 1 year and 1 month before our own government had him killed and then lied to us for, how many years has it been? 80? 60? Yeah, 60. Says, now, therefore, I, John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, do set aside and proclaim Wednesday, the 17th day of October, 1962, as the National Day of Prayer. On this day, let us all pray, each following the practices of his own faith. Let us pray for our nation and for other nations of the world. May we especially ask God's blessing upon our homes, that this integral unit of society may nurture our youth and give to them the needed faith in God, in our nation, and in their future. Our citizens, that they may increase in the desire to promote mercy and justice, peace and freedom, goodwill and brotherhood, that they may open new frontiers in helping to alleviate hunger, ignorance, and disease. Pray for our nation that each new achievement may add to our heritage of faith. Pray for our world that this generation may experience the fruits of peace and may know the real meaning of brotherhood under God. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States of America to be affixed. And I would add, Amen. Pray for his soul and his brother's soul, and I'm sure we will find out that Robert F. Kennedy was also killed by our government. And God has said no stone will remain unturned. All these things will be found out. And I believe that this is the year, this is the president who is going to reveal all of this. And we as a country are going to have to steel ourselves to all of this terrible realization, what we will end up probably calling the big or the great reveal. And then we have to prayerfully, seriously pay attention to what is going on in our government so that this kind of thing can never, ever happen again. Thank you for joining us for this study. God bless you, and take care.